Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Area Research Committee webinar on September 11th. And my name is Christine Perret. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar and to give you a little bit of background. Also, I want to make sure that people know that you are on listen-only mode. However, if you want to ask questions or make comments, I invite you to use the GoToWebinar control panel. There is a section for questions where you can put in any comments or questions there. Today's webinar is going to be given by Savannah Romero, who has completed for the area the research project he'll be describing for us. Area Research Committee projects are very exciting and a value-added benefit for our members. What Savannah will be talking about today is public information, or at least we are able to share this, but there's some things that he'll be pointing to that are not available to the general public, but only to members. Savannah, would you please go to the next slide?
Why is not doing? Oh, it's free. Oh, no, here we go. Sorry, Christine, takes a bit of time.
Okay, you can leave the presentation mode perhaps and go back into presentation mode, see if that helps.
Oh, I think it's moved now. You should see the slide.
Unfortunately, no, I do not see that. So I'll tell you what, I will start that in my screen and
okay.
Then we will be able to, you'll be able to sort that out separately.
Okay.
Okay.
I can see the slide.
Oh, you can. Okay, so it's just my problem. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now I see it. Today I'll be talking a little bit about the background on the research committee, and then Savannah will be speaking for about half an hour about the project and the findings and some of his recommendations. Then he'll also be talking about one of the tools that he provided to members, and then some directions for future research. Would you please go to the next slide?
What?
Well, I'll summarize while that's coming up. For those of you who might be new to the area, we do some thought leadership content, including webinars, white papers, blog posts. We also provide networking. We help to reduce the skills gap, providing support for education of people who are professionals in this field. And we have a number of committees. Okay, I will show my screen and okay, so we have some committees that focus on different barriers to adoption. In this case, the Area Research Committee addresses these barriers more widely by asking members what pain points we have and how we can advance the technologies for the betterment of all the members. So now I would like to turn it over to Savannah. I'm happy to advance the slides. Maybe
yes.
That will be smoother.
Yes,
okay.
will definitely be smoother. Sorry for
problem.
The technical problem. Nice to meet you, everyone. And thank you for coming on this webinar and listen to our work. My name is Savannah Romero. Briefly, I'm working for Birkbeck College Department of Management, in which we look a lot on emerging technologies. And I've also have a past, if you want, or a present about IoT as an analyst. So I'm coming from an IoT Internet of Things point of view, and I embrace this project with great joy because it takes us into an emerging area in which we have a lot of interesting potential, a lot of interesting activities that can be done, but also a number of challenges to overcome. And as you can see in the slide, the research objectives was really to understand this idea of convergence of IoT, AI, and AR. Try to see what is happening in the marketplace. So looking at the adoption, on how people are doing it, and what challenges are facing, but also what benefits this convergence can bring to enterprises. I'd like also to highlight that the scope here is really, if you want, industrial enterprise oriented. So how our work has been focused on certain sectors, and that does not mean that this type of convergence has some potential in other enterprise-based environment, which I will kind of suggest towards the end. Christine, if you go to the next slide, the idea was really to look at what there was there in terms of projects, but also understand the existing research and approaches that there are in the literature. So the research was really a combination of talking with companies, and in a wide sense, from the manufacturer, if you want, and the AR companies, the IoT platform vendors, and at the same time reading a lot, absorbing a lot of academic articles and literature from the business. Why this? Because through the literature we could understand, let's say, a bit of theory in terms of architecture and in terms of challenges to implementation, but also to gather case studies, so activities that are happening in the marketplace. The interview with the experts was really to feel the sentiment of this. Talking about the implementation, talking about the challenges, the benefits that we can achieve, how we can accelerate adoptions, and so on. The results of all these is in three deliverables, let's call it like that. As you can see from the slide, there is a report which is exclusive to the area members. There is then a case study which is inspired by an existing one, but we have used a bit of creativity to prospect this case study toward the future, and is public, that case study. And then there is a readiness self-assessment tool, which again gathers from the literature, but the things we wanted to do, we want to understand if within an Industry 4.0 assessment tool that you can find around, you can start to bring in assessments around the AI capability, assessments around the AR capability, and so on. And we will discuss this towards the end of the presentation. If you go to next slide, Christine, what I wanted to tell you a bit the story really on how and why for me is interesting this project, and I think also for the area members and for you. So as I said, I'm coming from an IoT background, and here there is a graph, a chart from a company I'm collaborating with quite often, which is IoT Analytics, in which IoT Analytics with this chart try to tell you that the actual adoption of IoT is happening, is almost ubiquitous, if you want, is ubiquitous, but there are some areas in which the implementation are more prominent, also more mature in certain sense, and definitely the industrial sectors, which are the main actor, the main unit of analysis of this research, are under an intense development of IoT solutions. There is always a story about a number of Industry 4.0 activities, smart manufacturing, and so on. So it's an important area. So the idea is that the IoT has been adopting, or is in a phase of great adoption, and is expanding. But if we go to next slide, we should also highlight that the IoT has certain problems. Here I put a sort of tag mode, which problems are not only one, but there are problems. There are problems of security, there are problems of trust. The IoT per se is an integration of solutions, and there are problems of interoperability, problem of scalability. If in the IoT we want to do really the IoT, which means taking the data, gathering the data, analyzing this data, take the decision out of this data, many organizations are not ready for doing that. So there is an issue of data readiness. And then there is the next step of the IoT. So it's not just monitoring something, a space or a device, it's actually predicting condition and taking decisions out of those predictions. Now, in order to do that, the IoT, let's say they need some help, and need help from other technologies. If we go to next slide, my view is that we are entering, if you want, a new era of convergence. Is not specifically only one. There are many types of convergence. Many types of technologies are coming together. And because I'm coming from an IoT background, if you want, they're coming together to help the IoT to really realize that vision, that potential, and that vision that the IoT has set. And you can observe around you quite a few activities in terms of this convergence. You have, for example, in the recent mobile GSMA in Barcelona, this idea of intelligent connectivity, when you bring the 5G with the IoT, with the AI. You have this idea of introducing the DLT or blockchain for solving the problem of trust among devices, or try to solve the problem of security, and therefore you have IoT, DLT, AI together. Here we want to look at, if you want, a different type of convergence. We want the IoT, we want the AI to help the IoT to analyze the data that IoT solutions are gathering from spaces. But then we want to use these analyses and this data in a way that enhance the visualization capabilities of a person involved in this application. So here we are not talking about substituting the human in this, but we are talking of enhancing the capability of humans in connected environments. Here you see the predicting, prescribing, visualizing, and engaging through augmented reality. And this is the context. If you go to the next slide, we reduce our research, between brackets, we look, the focus of this research is this convergence, this idea of bringing together IoT, AI, and AR. Therefore, the research wanted to understand if it's just a curiosity of Saverio, that, or something that is actually happening in the marketplace. And if we go to the next slide, we start to see at the architectural point of view. And this is not really something that is our idea. It comes from the research, and we have tried to to summarize in a sort of a macro architectural view, if you want. In this convergence, in people, in organization doing this type of projects, or trying to do this type of project, there is this view, which you have basically 3 macro layers. The first layer is the data production, sensing and gathering and exchange layer, so the IoT one. Then on top of it, you have the utilization of the data in a sense of analytics of the data, but bringing that level of analytics up in order to go to the prediction mode, so the use of AI. And we find out through the research that we are talking primarily about machine learning, mainly at this stage. And then we have the consumption, let's say the data consumption layer, which is the augmented reality layer. Now, we should never forget that we can do all these nice things only and if our application is security by design designed. So we have this security vertical layer that goes across these 3 macro layers, which needs to be there. And again, this is I'm talking with, I'm using the words of the interviewees, head of the research. This is an absolute necessity in order to do projects that involve IoT, AI, and AR. So if we want to expand, and we go to next slide, we want to expand this architecture a little bit. Let's see what we have found out. So I think you can summarize again the expansion of the architecture through this slide. You have on one side, let's say on the bottom part, you have the IoT part, and the IoT part is basically made of an hardware layer, let's call it like that, in which we have the devices part of an IoT deployment, sensors, actuators, IoT gateways, devices, and so on. Then you have the connectivity layer, which looks at all the form of connectivity necessary for an IoT deployment. And it's important to say that it's not just one form of connectivity, it could be a combination of forms of connectivity. And so you see there between brackets, the wireless side, the wired short range, the long range, and so on. And then you start to have the IoT platform, which in this case, because we look primarily at the industrial side, let's call it industrial internet IoT platform. So in which you have a number of layers, as you might know. You have the connectivity management layer, you have the device management layer, and then you have the data management analytics layer. And at this layer, there is the introduction of the AI. And how this introduction of the AI is happening? We found out that there are two main ways of doing it. On one side, you have the IoT platform that is evolving their data management and analytics services towards AI. And this could be the case of an IBM, for example, and not only. But then there is a lot of collaborations. We have found out collaboration between the IoT platforms, or the IoT vendors, an organization that we call here industrial AI/ML platform vendor, which collaborates, which they create a layer that sits on the top of the platform that enables the use of AI/ML tools. Now, on top of this, then you have the so-called augmented reality platform, because you know better than me, coming from an AR environment, the AR is not just the device, but is also the software, the back-end software necessary, and the computer vision side necessary for realizing an AR environment. So this is I would say summarize a bit the architectural approaches in organization or consortia that works around IoT, AI, AR projects. If we go to the next slide, here now, the idea is, okay, we have seen the architectural way. How do we actually deploy? Which is the scenario? Yeah. And in the scenario, in the deployment scenario, enters all a number of considerations that, from an IoT perspective, are not new, but are very important to take into account. And the main consideration is where the intelligence sits. So we are talking about cloud-based type of scenario. So where the AI/ML suite sits on a cloud system, but then we can also think, and we should think, at the strong emergence of edge computing and whole the edge side of the IoT, on which the AI/ML suite, or part of it, can stay on an IoT device, ideally, or on an IoT gateways. Where the augmented reality sits, the augmented reality obviously is a device that sits with the humans. It depends on what type of capabilities we want to give to the air device. And here there is quite a bit of debate on the stage of development we have around the AR device and the AR platform. In a sense that can the AR platform be itself an IoT device with an AI ML suite in? And this is a discussion that has come very often during the conversations, the conversation with interviewees. So this is a bit the scenario in which basically we are trying to balance, if you want, the intelligence between cloud and the edge, depending on the business context. At the end of the day, the choices are all depending on business context, on business values and things we want to achieve. We have in the report, we have designed 6 deployment scenarios, which describes the evolution in location of intelligence, if you want, of a potential IoT AI AR application. So in a situation in which we have, we do not have AI ML, which is some of the cases, situation in which the ML is located in the cloud, situation in which the machine learning goes very close to the edge. So this is a bit from a technological perspective, if you want, how the things are evolving. And I want to highlight the word evolving because we are really in a journey here. Yeah. If we go to next slide now. The next step was to understand, okay, this is all nice and exciting, but is happening or not, and where? And we have used a case study methodology, use case study methodology to understand the type of application, the type of projects, organizations, and consortia are bringing together. If we go to the next slide, we started to look at more generally the case study in which IoT, AR, and AI were kind of claimed to be together. And we looked at projects in which augmented reality was used into industrial context. And this research was done primarily through secondary and was a gateway then to talk with the right people on the primary in order to understand a bit more about these projects. We gathered 100 projects, application of AR in industrial context. Now, first considerations was not all of them are using a connected conditions. For example, there are some training applications in which the application is not used in a connected environment, and therefore for us was not really the application we want to analyze. There were many others in which artificial intelligence was not used at all. Among these 100 projects we looked at, you can see here a classification which is probably not new to you, working in AR and industrial environment. Is primarily the use of AR, as you can see, looks a lot on the right, on the area of maintenance, remote and non-remote maintenance. There is a lot on the manufacturing side and a lot on the training. Now, we took these 100 projects and we observed which one actually were used in a connected environment, so in an IoT environment, and maybe using artificial intelligence. If we go to next slide, we can see that we looked at 35 projects in which there was certainly and I have to emphasize these projects. Most of them were test beds. Yeah, there were no commercial deployments, most of them, but some of them, they were very important test beds. 35 of these projects were used into in a connected environment. So in an environment in which there was an IoT deployment with devices connected and so on. But as you can see, not most of, some of them actually, I have to say, a good half of it, the machine learning component or the AI component was not really present. But it was clear from the interview that was seen as the next step. So again, as when I say the story is a journey, the journey was observed into this project, the evolution of this project, and in our interviews. There is almost the idea that we are starting for, let's say, an industry 4.0, so IoT application, and then we move on the AI, and then we move on the AR. Or maybe we are on an IoT environment, we use the AR first, and then we introduce the AI. So the directions were quite different, but there is a roadmap, a technology roadmap. Here you can see in the table in these slides, we kind of changed the name of the use cases, and you can see where the AI was used. Not always, and you can see that in many cases it was not used at all. But these were all applications which an AR component was used. With the AR component here, I'm referring to an AR device with some software, with some AR software. Now, if we go to the next slide, where these case studies are in terms of sector. As I said, we're talking about very industrial, process-oriented enterprises. You can imagine majority of them were manufacturing. I took out automotive or manufacturing because of its importance. The automotive industry is clearly has a lot of interest in this story, and in particularly in the use of AR in an industry 4.0 deployment. And then come the other. Personally, I was expecting a bit more in the oil and gas mining environment because of the remote worker story, which is very important for them, and from an IoT perspective, is very important. But I didn't find that many. Certainly, I'm not. I don't want to say that I've covered all, but I think it's. This kind of classification per industry is a good indication where the attention is. So now the next step, if we go to the next slide, was, all right, let's understand. We had an idea about the architecture. We have an idea about where these projects are happening. Let's see why we are doing it. We are just doing it because it's a cool idea or because there are some benefits for doing it. And at the same time, let's try to understand which problems there are. So if we go to the next slides, here there is a summary of the benefits. First point, very important one, there is no quantitative metrics for assessing the benefit of these applications. It's not a big surprise, nothing that should be worried about, in my opinion, because we are at the beginning of a story. It will be interesting to have, for example, a number of case studies anyway, in which quantitative metrics could be available, because as I will tell you later on the challenges side, there is an absolute need to communicate the beauty of this towards enterprises. And you can do that in a very effective way when you have quantitative metrics, in particular the ROI. But we do not have at the moment many quantitative metrics, but we have a lot of positive comments. Yeah, and these comments you see on the table are not me wording them, but I'm quoting. I'm here quoting interviewees. I'm here quoting results of existing projects. So you can see that the organization involved in or trying to deploy this sort of application of convergence finds a very important benefits for an industrial environment. Like reducing downtime is a problem that the manufacturing sector has very strongly. We improve productivity. we improving the efficiency of worker activities and so on. So the benefits are there, and there is a consensus around these benefits. There is a general consensus around that the convergence of IoT, AI, AR has a tremendous opportunity, despite maybe being in a sort of initial phase of development. So if after the benefits, okay, now everything is great, but let's see what the problems are. If we go to the next slide, you see I use a very common technology adoption life cycle in order to say that we are at the beginning of this story, is in a very early stage of adoption. In my opinion, one of the more important problem I found during the research was that there is a lot of involvement for large organizations in doing this, but there is a very weak relationship between the worlds of this convergence, particularly between the AR world and the IoT world. I had very few interviews in which, particularly on the IoT side, in which they were saying that I don't know what to do with an AR component. I've never worked with that. I think manufacturing companies have other problems to face than using AR. And I think this is the strongest probable barrier, in my opinion. If we go to the next slide, I try to classify the challenges that come from the research in three main areas: the technological challenges, business and market challenges, and organizational challenges. The technological challenges, all the interviews were kind of very yes, they raise a number of issues, but they all believe that those issues can be solved in the next couple of years. And therefore, for example, today we do not have enough hardware, AR hardware. Don't worry about it. In a couple of years, the industry is very active. We'll face that. We'll solve that. Organizational data readiness is not that diffuse, but we are working towards that, and we are going to a better conditions, and so on. Probably the only one in which they seemed a bit skeptical was the one about standards. And here we had also a discussion during the project about the standard story. And the one about standard, reduced in a very simple way, was I do not want to develop, as I say, the same software all the time for new hardware. Now, and here maybe the area team can also intervene if they want later on, but there are standards. There is a lot of standard activity around AR. There are a lot of standard activity around IoT. Probably is not that type of activity is not well known, and therefore needs to be diffused a bit more in terms of education. But there are a number of working groups that is working around in prestigious organization and standard body that are working around the problem of standard. So the technological challenges, in my opinion, are challenges, but they are not this terrible mountain that we cannot climb. Where the challenges become more mountains difficult to climb is when we go business level and organizational level. I think in that case, we need much more work to do. And one of the main one in terms of business is that AR remains an expensive solution and affordable just for a very few organizations. Then is open to debate this, but I think this was quite common sentence, let's say. The software license model needs to change. There is a mentality that CAR from an entertainment point of view, therefore from an end user like a customer like Savannah, we want to apply the same type of license model to an enterprise. no, doesn't really work. We need to change it. This was another concern. And the other concern that for me is the most important one is IoT and AI players and AR players do not really engage as they should. Then we go down to organizational challenges. In the moment in which you want to implement this solution in your organizations, and here you have needs of management changes. The claim was that managers used to say, they say, sorry, that they like the idea of an AR, but then when we go down the road to do it, we don't do it. And then we need to face two issues in some part of the world, not in all part of the world. The first one is the perception of control by workers. So wearing a AR helmet can be perceived as a mode of control by the workers, and this is primarily in very, I would say, unionized environment. There is an issue of privacy towards the workers, which needs to be faced. A discussion, a clear discussion with trade unions is important in this case. The second one is that there is a fear that everything we are doing here is just to eliminate humans and therefore to reduce or go to null labor. Instead, here we are not doing that. We don't want to do that. We are enhancing the capabilities of the worker. But this view is not seen or very rarely. So this is an issue that needs to be faced. If we go to the next slide, who has to face all this? Because this is what I said is not easy. As I said, technological side, I think as I'm in the technology environment now for 20 years, I can see the technological development, the pace of technological development is so great in the last 20 years that things are coming and problems have been solved. The organizational management issues are more, in my opinion, more complicated. So who is solving? Who needs to maybe try to solve or drive the solutions to those challenges in a collaborative way? Because here we are in a condition of absolute need of collaboration. We cannot do this on our own, as you cannot really do an IoT deployment on your own. You cannot do an IoT AI AR on your own. We need to build an ecosystem. We need to reinforce the ecosystem. And into this picture, you see which ecosystem I'm talking about. Yeah, you have three worlds here coming together: IoT, AI, AR, and therefore all the companies coming from this world collaborating for doing these projects. There is a role for system integrator, absolutely, in this landscape, and there is also a proactive role of the manufacturer. Yeah, manufacturer is not just the adopter of the solution; it can become also part of the implementation at the design phase. And then you have around this ecosystem, you have the so-called, in my opinion, influencers. These are organizations that can be part of the projects, can influence the project and the development, can influence all the process of the convergence, as we are seeing. Yeah, you see projects in which there is a strong involvement of university. There are industrial alliances that are very motivated on this topic. Apart from area, you see the Industrial Internet Consortium very keen into this, Industry 4.0 very keen into this. So there are a number of organizations that can influence and positively the ecosystem at the center. It's a very rich ecosystem, I know. There are a lot of organizations, but it's absolutely necessary to collaborate in order, particularly to create those collaboration between different skills. Here we are talking about a story which is very multidisciplinary. in every sense, so requires collaboration. If we go to the next slide, okay, the research, I don't think the research is complete. It gives you a picture, gives you, let's say, the first, open the road, if you want, to something that we need to work all together. There is more work to do. So in order to enable the area members to start to understand this space and start also to assess their capability and the capability of their customers to embrace the journey, we have designed, created some tools, which I will talk about if you go to the next slide. These tools are for members. There are two tools. I'll discuss only one here. The other tool is more, let's say, an easy navigation on this world, if you want. This other tool I'm talking about, the Readiness Assessment tool, is really to understand at what stage as an organization I am in terms of IoT, AI, AR potential deployments. And who can use? The idea is that the manufacturer, so the customer, can use it, but also the providers can use it in order to understand the status of the customer they are working with. Please, this is an entry point, yeah. Is a way of an initial assessment. As you know, you need to have a number of steps in order to go from an idea of a project towards the actual implementation. So, but gives you, let's say, that that tool to start the research, your research, if you want. So, if we go to next slide, we will not. I will just show it. I will just tell you how it works. I mean, it's nothing exceptional. It's very simple, very focused, and it tries to address and understand certain areas that are important from an organization. There are 6 areas in which you answer some questions. The questions are there is an example there. Is, as you can see, a very, very, very simple question, which you score the level that represents the status in which you are. We are looking at the strategies as all. Everything, all this starts if we have the backup of the organization and of the strategy. We look at is our industry IoT ready, AI ready, so the smart factory side and the smart operation side. How are products IoT enabled, data enabled? Do we have AR activity into existing AR activity in our organization? And 3 questions on the employees, really to understand the readiness, if you want, of them, which is a terrible term, readiness of employees, but really to understand if we have the challenges I described before, the organizational challenges in relation to the employees. The result is a scoring. There is also a scoring as an overall, a scoring for the various areas. And there are also some descriptions, some indications, depending on your scoring. And really, I hope this helps starting the process, the research process of an organization of a provider. If we go to next slide, because I realize I'm taking a bit too much time. Some key views from me, really. I noticed that there is a consensus about that this is a route that we need to take. So we need to bring together IoT and AR because there are just some clear benefits. There are some challenges. The technological one are not the difficult one to solve, but more about the business and organizational ones, and therefore need a lot of, I think there is a need of a lot of educations to do, which can be done through relationship in the ecosystem, so reinforcing the ecosystem And this is also an invitation to an industry organization like AREA to collaborate more with industry association for in the IoT environment and AI space. If we go to next slide, just to close, as I said, for me, this is a starting point. Is a starting point, this research. There are many things that can be done by you as a member, area, and so on. Certainly, this is a story we looked here at the enterprise side, but it's not just there. Yeah, there are other areas, business-oriented, maybe less process-oriented, but in which we should look at. It's important to understand what this means for small, medium, and sized enterprises. We need to understand how to invite them to do it, which is is the usual problem we have with tech. We start with large companies, and it's quite clear why, but then we need to understand how to embrace the entire business system, which is made by SMEs a lot on this new story, in order to avoid digital divide that are not beneficial for anyone. I invite to use the readiness tool to assess it first, but then also to use it as a research tool to understand, a survey tool to have a picture of where the organization are. It would be nice, for example, if we can have the data from the area members and see what where they are to, or what they think. And then I think it's always useful to have this is for the members. It's always useful to have a database of case studies, potentially with some metrics, that can be used for discussion with customers. That can be, you can say to the customer, look, this type of project can take you this type of benefits, this measure, these are some examples, and so on. Yes, and I think this is last slides for me. If you go to the next slide, I really want to thank the area team and the area members for their patience with me on this research. For me, was a pleasure, was an intellectual challenge, and simply an enrichment for me. If any one of you, wants to talk with me after this webinar, this is my email address, s.romeo@bbk.ac.uk. And yes, I really thank you all for the time and for the interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Saverio. That's fantastic. I think you did a great job of expanding, such an interesting intersection. As we said, this is the convergence, and I think the original title was like merging, but yes. It's going to be a very long time before these technologies actually merge. They are all evolving at this different speeds, and not always in the same direction. We do have a few questions. I'd like to remind anybody that if you have specific questions for Saverio or me, please use the GoToWebinar interface. So one of the questions was about the table or that you gave about IoT, AI, and AR use cases. There was one, you called it manufacturing process optimization. Could you explain if you have any details? What exactly do you have in mind there? Which processes, or how could processes be optimized?
These were there were a couple of case studies in which the assembly line required a very strong presence of the worker, because there were a lot of errors, possible errors to happen, and actually the number of errors were quite high. And the idea was, in these two cases, I think were two, but I can check the details. The idea was to reduce the number of errors through a process of prediction and also to tell the worker, look, this is a situation in which you can have a potential mistake. So you should do in this way. So this, I call that optimization, manufacturing process optimization, because the idea was to reduce the number of errors in order to increase the speed of manufacturing, and therefore optimizing the resources that in that case was the ability of the worker to avoid the error. And so we call it in that way. Is within the assembly group. It's actually this inspired also the case study that will be, I guess, public will be public for readers.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I can go
Excellent.
I can go back and look in more details for the person who raised the question.
Which the specific use cases? Yes, I can get those over to the person who asked the question. So another question was about the schematic and the architectural view. You have at the top the human-machine interface in an AR capacity. The question, I think, is a little subtle, but I'm gonna expand the question. Did you see any examples where IoT information for human use was either raw data, or could there also be analytics or other, the output of an AI system given to the human? So the question is, is it raw data that is being presented, and or are there also analytical, like repair time, mean failure times, things like that?
I think we're analytical, and the idea I think they were analytical. Also, I think the idea of evolution, if you want, was to increase that analytical capability. To increase the level of sophistication of visualization of analytical capability on an AR device. So it's seen as an evolution of the application. So was, the one I saw was definitely analytical. I also remember an interview in which the interviewee was claiming that we need to provide analytical information in a clear, easy way, because here we want to ease the activity of the worker, and so we want to deliver to them the important information, the important analytical information, in a very clear way.
Yes, so, and not to increase the cognitive load that person has in their job.
Yeah, let's say that we want to reduce the effort, intellectual effort. We want to move the intellectual effort of the worker in moments in which it's required. In other situations, we want to streamline the activity.
Sure. Another question that someone has asked, if you had, in your interviews or in the case studies, seen what is the expectation of the users with respect to the privacy? Maybe some of the data that is being collected in the sensors is about the user's status or its state. Maybe, did you see anything about privacy or concerns about worker concerns? Yeah.
So there are, as I said, the more, let's say, workers' concerns come from Europe, come from European interviews and European cases, in which there were two topics raised, connected, I guess, also between them. One was the sense of control, the one was the privacy. So the sense of control, in a sense that you are looking at me, and therefore on my personal data, because you can maybe measure, for example, through the ARL method, through other sensors, my health conditions. This was mentioned quite a few times. How, I think it's an important issue to face. And my question, okay, how do we do that? How do we face that? I know is a $1 million question, and there was not really an answer, but I think it's a concern.
Indeed, and for those who might not have been attending, well, the area has recently done a project on the subject of barriers to adoption of augmented reality, more specifically in the manufacturing context. And in that project, there was a high focus on the worker acceptance. And this question of privacy is very, very significant. So thank you, Saverio. I think we will wrap up then the question and answer section. I'd like to remind those of you who enjoyed this webinar that we do have 3 more public webinars planned in the next few months. We will have all the webinars are posted on the area events page, as are other events that we participate in and our members are interested. So the next one is going to be in a few weeks, in 2 weeks from today, in fact, about the use cases and use case selection. Then there's 2 more research committee webinars. The one I'll be presenting in October focuses on interoperability and standards, a topic that Saverio touched on today. And then November 26th is not about interoperability. That webinar is also hosted by the research committee, and it's going to be focusing on different organizations, one in the US and one in Europe, that fund and conduct research in manufacturing, including some augmented reality projects. We'll be hearing from EFRA, EFFRA in Europe, and the Manufacturing Times Digital Consortium in the US, MXD, an area member. Thank you very much for your attention. Many of you I know are going to be going off next week to the EWTS, the Wearable Technology Summit. I hope that if you're there, you'll be able to contact Mark Sage. He's the area executive director, and he'll be attending and chairing a few panels. Thank you very much for your attention today. I hope that we have answered some of your questions and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. Bye-bye.